I've been here for 31 years in another month, and I have a 31-year-old son. He was a member of your Cub Scout pack, and he was a member of the Boy Scouts, and he was an Eagle Scout, and his project was to build the lifeguard stands that are now at the beach. So, like many of the other projects, they make a lasting impact. I'm also, one of the things I'm going to be sharing is an amazing poster that some Girl Scouts for their Silver Award made, because they also did a project on how to help the lake. And they've made a series of posters. There's 3 of them that you can download from our website and print out and put on your refrigerator or wherever you put things these days. They've been passing out flyers with wildflower seeds attached to help in planting rain gardens. They've been speaking at different events. They were at Green Day. Are you a Girl Scout mom?
No, they're my students. I'm a 7th grade science teacher, so they're my students. And they've been working really hard on it.
Yes,
Really
I
nice.
am just very amazed by
this.
I really need, they relied on our website and got information, did more research, help from their teachers, I imagine, and encouragement.
Only a small amount. They really did most of it on their own.
And they put this together, and they've been doing other events and speaking. And so, since they're also Scouts, I thought that would be helpful. They're a little bit older than you. I think they're in like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
7th grade.
Okay. So we'll come back to this in a minute. We can put it wherever it has to. If it's going to hold up. There. First of all, I wanted to say we have a website, so it's easy to remember. It's called lakemassapod.net, and that's in addition to the town official committee webpage that has information that's you can also find, but it's easier to go to lakemassapod.net and search the tabs there. First, I want to hear quickly, how do people use the lake? So raise your hand if you swim at the lake. Raise your hand if you fish at the lake. Raise your hand if you ice skate. Not much ice lately.
This winter was tough.
Yeah. Raise your hand if you kayak or canoe. Ever been in one on the lake? Raise your hand if you ever sailed on the lake. Oh, you guys need to get some sailing.
I sailed on the ocean.
Oh, wow. Well, that's pretty cool. What else is there? How many of you have heard a concert at the lake? How many of you have walked by the lake? Okay. How many of you have thrown rocks at the lake? Okay, I think I've picked the audience, yeah. Good, so you like the lake? Okay. And of the parents, how many of you lived here in, I don't know, the 1980s? Anybody? The 90s? Since 90s, 2000s? Okay, so kind of a range there. So the last time the lake had, as many of you know, in 2021, which is 2 summers ago, we had kind of a crisis where the cyanobacteria bloom, it's often called blue-green algae for short, actually resulted in the lake being closed for over 2 weeks. And that kind of woke us all up. So we got on this committee, and the town's been investing more resources. We've been doing all kinds of testing. We're doing outreach and education because, as Claire said, it takes everybody. We all created this problem, and the generations before us, and we all need to help fix it up. And the generations that come after, and you guys are the generations that's coming right up. And so, back in 1984, was the last time there was a comprehensive, what they call watershed-based plan, because there was kind of a crisis in the lake back then, and there were more closings. Interesting, the E. coli closings then were more on the Memorial Beach side. And after they put in the septic system, wastewater treatment at the high school, tied in the beach pavilion, that kind of helped that area. But there was more algae, and so they did the in-depth study and said, if you guys don't clean up your act, this lake will be eutrophic, which basically means choked with bad stuff and kind of dead by the year 2000. So the town really did a good job in implementing a lot of the recommendations. And it turned around, and we got about almost 40 years of a pretty healthy lake. There'd be the occasional, on your side, E. coli problems, which weren't there 40 years ago, oddly. And so there's been more development up that area, I guess.
They're also considering the fact that the lake was cleaned by the bogs.
And also like mussels, there were, there's various
and
kinds of
when I
shellfish.
first moved here, there were mussel shells all along the
Right.
beach.
And so there were natural processes to clean out the lake as well. So for the last 2 years, myself and many others on the committee have learned a whole lot. So one of the things we've learned is that lakes do have a life cycle. And even in the most pristine conditions, just organic matter coming in and the nutrients, the phosphorus and the nitrogen, even if it's wild areas, over time will start to cause a lake to get a bit stagnant. And so that's accelerated when you've got all these people living in the watershed. Now I want to just do it here. The watershed, the concept is, think of what's the bathtub around the lake that drains into the lake. So here you've got a bathtub, right? And here's the bathtub. Well, the sides is the whole area of town that drains into our lake. And so you can see it here. Here's a picture. So this is for the lake. It's called the surface water. There's groundwater, another protected area that feeds our drinking water wells. And there's a little overlap. So this is what flows into the lake. There's another area here that overlaps that flows into the wells. And even if you live outside of here, you're in somebody else's watershed. So you have to be careful for their water. Maybe there's a watershed just south that goes down to the Taunton River. And then there's other ones here that eventually work their way into the Neponset River. And the Neponset River, one thing that's interesting about Sharon is that because of the height that you were talking about, we are like at the top of the headwater for the Neponset River watershed that goes all the way through Quincy and into the ocean here.
Right.
So we're lucky because we're not inheriting other people's problems, but we are passing our problems downstream. The other reason we're fairly lucky in Sharon is we have both, it's not like a kettle pond like on Cape Cod where it's just a hole, that was left. So we have water coming in that comes, a lot of it from Sucker Brook down by Camp Wonderland. Do you know where that is? It's by Cape and Hill. And then there's also a little hidden lagoon behind the community center that I literally didn't know about for 29 years. And that has about another 22% of the water coming in there from various wetlands and little tributaries. So that's about half of the water coming in. And then the rest, there's other little inflows here. And this is on these maps are on our website, so you can find them if you want more. We did what we called a dashboard, which was to show where the hot spots were last year in the lake. And we primarily focused last year, we hired a firm, TRC, to do comprehensive testing in the deep hole. Anybody guess how deep the deep hole is in Sharon?
49 feet.
Pretty close, yeah.
48.
I mean, it kind of depends on how much rain. It's like 45 to getting up there a little bit more. And so the average depth, anybody know that?
45.
Average is,
14.
how do you know that?
Robert, you're doing some studying today?
Very good. The average depth is 14, and the deep hole we say is 45 plus. And so, and then your coves. There's the South Cove down by Everwood here. There's Fletcher's Cove, which is by Sturgis and Livingston. And I never knew what you called like the beach area. It's called Horton's Cove. There must be a Horton that it's named after. And so we tested in each of those coves and in the deep part of the lake. And they test both at the surface, and then they put something down all the way 45-ish feet down, and they test down there. And then they test every, couple meters coming up. That's called a water column, that whole column of water. And so last year, the other thing is 2 years ago, when we had the balloon. Anybody remember what the weather was like 2 years ago? Any thoughts about what might have caused that balloon?
Hot and humid.
It was
Dry.
rainy.
Oh.
The whole year had more than 12 inches of rain over the average. But not only that, instead of it all happening in spring, a lot of it happened in the summer. There were about 3 to 3.5 inch rainstorms. It was like June, July, August, September. So it was like, what happens when you're in a bathtub and a ton of water comes in? Is it going to go fast or slow? Whoosh. And what does whooshing water do to the land? Well, your science teacher might say, what?
It breaks it down and slows.
It does erosion, but it also pushes the nutrients, the phosphorus and the nitrogen, which are things that tend to either feed this cyanobacteria, the blooms, or nitrogen will also speed up E. coli production. So they tend to feed the things that hurt the lake. So when there's a lot of them, then you have more problems with the algae. It was hot, but that July was actually cool. There was so much rain, it was a cooler month. So it's an interaction of the rain and the temperature. Last year, anybody remember the weather last summer? It was dry. And there was a drought. In fact, it was called a level 3, severe drought for a lot of the summer. And then it went to like a level 2 significant drought. And so that has its own challenges. It's more hot, there's more stagnation, there's less flow. It heats up, the water heats up faster when it's shallower. So last year is the first year we did comprehensive testing. They've always tested E. coli at the beaches, which has led to the shutdowns of beaches when it's high. And the good thing is typically it clears fairly fast in the Sharon's Lake because of the flow through. Again, out through that flume house and down to all the other dams where there used to be water power stations. And so last year, overall, of the testing we did, and most of it was monthly, but the beaches were tested weekly, about 20% or 1 out of 5 samples had high E. coli. Again, mostly down by Sucker Brook and the community center beach. And then, but 39% or 2 out of 5 samples had high phosphorus. And that was especially at inflows, especially after heavy rains, but also it was high in the deep hole, twice at the bottom, once at the top, and twice down by the South Cove. And although it wasn't it was actually high 5 times. There's a little channel that goes from a wetland into Fletcher's Cove. So I'll just kind of pass this around. It just sort of gives you hot spots. It's going to change year to year based on what the weather is, and also at how good we are at limiting some of these things in Sharon. So I am not a chemist. We have a teacher here, science teacher, that's good. So does anyone know what might contain phosphorus that we use either in our houses or our yards or that we drink.
We don't drink matches. They don't.
So here's a,
Matches do contain phosphorus.
so I mean all living things contain phosphorus and nitrogen. So if they're not all bad guys, right? But to help lawns grow thick and fast and very green, people put on fertilizer that has a certain mix of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, by state law now, you actually shouldn't be using phosphorus in fertilizer unless it's a new lawn or you're reseeding a sort of a problem lawn. And so when you go to the store, you'll mostly see bags of fertilizer that have 3 numbers, and often the middle number will be 0. So that's what you want. You also don't want a really high number of nitrogen because you don't need it, and it's just also going to create more runoff. Because think about it, before, I don't know, Scott's Fertilizer Company, people used like natural fertilizers like from animal dung or something. So now there's a lot of chemical fertilizers being used, way more than is needed. And then if you hire lawn service, you know, they're out there pretty much every 6 weeks doing their thing. So it's more than is needed, and it's better to cut back. What else has phosphorus? Well, there's phosphates, and there's something called phosphoric acid. And I'm a member of the yacht club. We have some little sailboats. And you got to watch what boat cleaners you buy, because the really strong ones that you don't have to scrub at all, they have a lot of phosphoric acid in them. And they're really bad because, you know, you often clean a boat near a lake. So find the kind that takes a little more elbow grease and doesn't have phosphoric acid. Same thing, so I remember we had to clean our deck once. What do you use? TSP, trisodium phosphate. There it is again. It's in certain car washes, boat washes, deck washes, siding washes. So there are other products better to use them. You know what's in Coca-Cola? Phosphoric acid. So you guys probably at this age like that kind of stuff, but I tell you, it's not good for your teeth, it's not good for your kidneys, and it's not good for the lake. So you might want to, whatever you do, don't pour any extra from a can by the beach or the lake. So, and as you were saying, there's other issues. You know, we don't have, we have our own drinking water source in Sharon. We also have our own, you know, waste septic system. We're not hooked up to town sewer anywhere. And that means more, particularly from older septic systems, if they start to fail, it's going to seep with these heavy rains into the lake. So it's good to try to make sure you pump your septic system regularly, and if it starts to fail, you bite the bullet and replace it. And the town actually has a low-interest loan program that's probably not well known about to help people who need to put in a new septic system.
Can we?
You know, your geese. There, you know, again, everything contributes. There's not one problem. You had the best quote when we did the first lake walk you came on. You said, you know what? Everybody blames everybody else for problems in the lake. But you know what? It's all of us. And that's true. I mean, the geese, when they are doing their business all over the beach, it's also unsanitary. And, but, you know, so we try to keep them in check. There's a border collie service, a woman who lives in Sharon, a husband that we hired to try to keep them moving on and that kind of thing. And pets, that's why they say please don't walk your dog right on the beach and make sure you pick up. So those are things. Like,
So can we feed the geese?
do not feed the geese, the ducks, the swans, the birds. They're healthier without it, and you also don't want them to come up to people. You'd rather they kind of get away from people. So what can you do, or how can you help? Well, there's all kinds of projects. I mean, there's educational events. There's spreading this around. There's thinking about how you could, pass that around. Here's a few other things. Just pass around. This is probably more for adults, top 10 things you can do to protect your lake. Here's how to, lawn tips on how to curb stormwater pollution. Oh, here's an interesting idea, and that one has a site on it. So UMass Amherst does soil testing for $20. Who's used that? Anyone? Okay, so I would really encourage you to do that. You gotta like get down deep to get a sample, not just the top. Send it off with your $20. Give them your email address, and they'll email you the results. So I was happy to see we were very deficient in phosphorus. And it's still very green. What did you find? What did you learn?
The clay is relatively acidic. Yeah, that's the big line there.
Mm-hmm.
It was very easy.
What did you learn, Claire?
Again, that we had acidic soil, which was better.
And here's just a poster I'll pass around that is one example of what the cyanobacteria bloom looks like. And it's kind of, light green. When it starts, it can be very kind of pretty and looks almost like a paint, but with the waves and stuff, it will kind of churn up and you'll get these sort of sticky grains, or I don't know, not a grain, clumps. And they may be down a foot or so. And that's when it's actually more dangerous because it's starting to degrade, and that's when the cyanotoxins are released. On the website, which I guess is, there's a whole section on cyanobacteria. We have a woman who was a research scientist, and she's been running a sort of a lab taking samples and plotting them. I just wanted to show you a couple things, like for a resource, under home, there's information on both the data from the last year. We track the level of a lake that's related to the rain, and also our conservation agent, Josh Philibert. Every weekday he goes and monitors and if needed adjusts the level of the control mechanism that lets water out of the lake. We have to let so much go downstream so we don't starve the Neponset River, and you also don't want it to get, so you want to have flow that's healthy flow. And when there's a drought, that's a challenge, or when there's a flood, also that can be a challenge. We have information on our water testing results, a short section on history and geology, and there's some interesting maps there. We have some stuff on recreation and events. Then threats, there's some more detail on the E. coli, the cyanobacteria, invasive species. We've got 2 invasive weeds, fanwort and milfoil, that we have to control in the lake. They grow in the shallower coves. And some stuff on climate. And we're very interested in making more connections between both, human things that we can control and how they impact the lake, and also the trends of climate change and storms and drought and how that impacts the lake. Then we have a section on how you can protect the lake, what you can do if you happen to be a lakefront owner. Is anyone here a lakefront owner? But it's really, even if you're a couple blocks from the lake, it's still going to work its way in. Septic, lawn care, outdoor washing, and invasive species. Our contact information, and then here, so here's for example, the Girl Scout lake posters. Let's see, pull one up. Yeah, it's slightly too slow. Okay. And then also here is the information on the cyanobacteria testing. So we are thrilled to have you guys interested in learning about the history of the lake and some of the conditions and what you can do.
You learned at least 2 things you could potentially do to help the lake.
We've learned more than 2.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Eli, did you have an idea?
It's polluted by cleaners that people put on their boat and animal waste and stuff like that.
Sure, well, that's right. Very good. All right.